Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our ParentMap Live ParentEd talk. Today we have Go Play Outside, Why Time Outdoors Matters More Than Ever with Linnea Westerlind and Elisa Murray. Linnea Westerlind is the author of Discovering Seattle Parks, a local guide and creator of the Year of Seattle Parks website, a free resource of more than 500 local and regional parks. She's also a contributor writer to 52 Seattle Adventures with Kids, which is ParentMap's guidebook to family fun around the Puget Sound. Together, Elisa and Linnea co-founded Outdoor Childhood Puget Sound, an effort to inspire and provide resources for families that spend time outside. Elisa Murray is a Seattle-based writer, editor, and communications specialist, a longtime former out and about editor of ParentMap, and she's edited the ParentMap guidebook 52 Adventures with Kids. During the time of COVID-19, she's explored every corner of Northeast Seattle neighborhood with her husband, son, and dog. My name is Brenda McCown. I'm the events manager for ParentMap. And for those of you not familiar with ParentMap, we proudly publish free print magazines. We've published several parenting books, and we host an award-winning website. Check out parentmap.com. We also produce dozens of live and now virtual events. I'm going to bring our speakers back on here momentarily. Before we begin, just a couple housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded and may be republished for educational and promotional usages. We will also email everyone a link to the recording of the webinar afterwards, so you can save it and rewatch. We encourage and invite your questions, so please submit any questions you have through the Q&A, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. And also, we couldn't do this without you, so thank you everyone for joining in and supporting our ParentMap Live events. We truly appreciate it. Also, thank you to our series sponsors of our ParentMap Live series. We have Little School and the Morningside Academy. Thank you for your support. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and begin the presentation.
Hi everyone, my name is Elisa Murray and I'm one of the presenters here along with Linnea Westerlind. And first I want to just thank ParentMap for hosting this event. The current air quality situation notwithstanding, I think this is a topic that's really on everyone's minds as we head into a fall of, at least for school-age children, remote learning. And Linnea and I think we would both say that we're not experts, but that we have a passion for this subject and have touched on it in a lot of different ways and love to gather other people's ideas and share them for inspiration and connection. I wanted to share just a little bit about me. Thanks for the great introduction, Brenna. I am a Seattle-based writer and editor and communications person. I had the pleasure of working at ParentMap as an editor for about 5 years, which is where a lot of these ideas come from and which is how I met Linnea. And you can see my one son, he's almost 11 now, but this was when he was 7 or 8, doing one of our favorite family activities outside, which is to find free snacks.
Hi, I'm Linnea Westerlind. I live with my family in West Seattle, and I have a 6th grader, and then I have twins in 4th grade. And we do try to get outside a lot, but we struggle with it as well, and especially during this difficult time right now. As they mentioned in the introduction, I am the author of the book Discovering Seattle Parks, which is a guidebook to parks in our area. And I created the blog yearofseattleparks.com about 10 years ago now when my oldest was a baby, and I decided to just try to see if I could visit all the parks in Seattle in 1 year. It ended up taking me 4 years. But ever since then, I'm just really passionate about parks and outdoors and do a lot of volunteering and advocacy around that issue. And also just want to say that, you know, we're all just doing our best as parents right now. So this is really just for idea sharing and just trying to share some inspiration and see how we can all do the best we can to get outside. All right, well, you know, really outdoor time does matter more than ever right now. It matters all the time, but it is going to be crucial this fall and winter. It's always harder as the weather changes and it just seems that more difficult to get outside. when we've got a little bit cooler weather. Of course, right now this smoke is just crazy. We have not experienced anything like this in a long time, if ever. So it's a little ironic today, but you know, the outdoors are important for lots of different reasons. And one of the reasons it's so important right now is just we have so much more stress and anxiety, both kids and adults. And then kids are spending a lot more time on screens. So it's really a relevant subject. And there are lots and lots of health benefits for adults and also for kids that have been really well documented in research. These are just a few of the many reasons. And in fact, there is so much research coming out all the time that doctors have even started prescribing nature or outdoor time for families because they just really want to emphasize how important it is for kids' health to spend time outside every day. And this may, you know, most people may already know this, but the CDC does say that school-age kids need 60 minutes a day of vigorous physical activity. And younger kids, like preschool age, they actually need 120 minutes a day. Sadly, only about a quarter of kids are getting as much physical activity as is recommended. So, you know, and I think we can be pretty sure that during the pandemic, a lot of kids are getting even less. So it's really an important thing for us all to be thinking about right now.
And I just wanted to touch on, you know, Linnea mentioned this already, but we're experiencing, I think, an unprecedented situation of allowing our kids on screens, and a lot of it's good. It's for socializing. I have an only child, and screen-based socializing really has saved us over the past 6 months. But it's also kind of tethered him indoors kind of more than ever. And now with remote learning, it's even harder to make that really necessary outdoor time and exploration happen. Our organized sports have disappeared over the past 6 months. I know there's some stuff that's happening. And of course, there's no recess unless you kind of set it up yourself. So there's a lot of challenges. And then parents, I'm doing this in the middle of my workday. So we're juggling lots of different things. And then we don't want this to be an added pressure. We want this to be kind of a fun thing that we are trying to help you strategize around. And then I think probably most of our listeners are familiar with this research, but you know, outdoors is the safest way to socialize right now in the time of COVID-19. Again, air quality notwithstanding. You know, in small groups with masks and doing social distancing, and these kids are doing a pretty good job and look like they're having a blast. According to a lot of research, is the best way to kind of be together with others right now. So that's the good news.
Well, we're going to just talk about some tricks and tips for getting your family outside this fall and winter. And one of those is to just make it a family habit. It seems to just make it that much easier if you already have it planned into your day or your week. If it works for you to take a family walk before the school day starts or at lunch, or maybe it's an evening bike ride that you do together. If you can just pick a time of day that works for you, that can make it a little bit easier. If you have some flexibility in your own work schedule and you can take some recess breaks at the same time as your kids, you could toss a ball in the backyard, you could do a quick walk around the block when the air quality gets better. Another thing is if you have more than one kid is to try to have a little bit of one-on-one time with them. And it doesn't have to be even something where you leave the yard or the neighborhood. It could just be, again, like playing in the backyard or doing something right in your immediate neighborhood. And then just also trying to take advantage of the school schedule if you do have any flexibility. So thinking about early release days, if that's a possible time when you could plan a fun family outing. I know I've got some friends that that's their plan for Wednesday afternoons, is kind of to hit pause on everything else and go do something fun together, maybe let the kids pick. Also the 3 to 5 p.m. window, if you can take a break and maybe shift some work later into the evening, that could be good. And our family really likes to do evening walks. And we found that that can be a nice way to just sort of wind down the day. Another trick is just to really think like a kid. There are so many fun things inside, like video games and screen time, that you really, you know, kids aren't just like, oh yeah, hiking sounds super fun with my family. At least that's the, you know, not the attitude I get at my home. But if you kind of just figure out some things that make it fun for kids, it can really help. One of them is to do fun stuff like climb trees, things that can make it really interesting. I am a big fan of using treats liberally as bribes. And I think when you're outdoors, that's the time to use it. So I do like little candy for hikes. We've done hot cocoa walks. We've even like microwaved a s'more and did an evening s'mores walk, which can be really fun. And if you just make it a little more fun, they can be much more willing to participate. And then foraging is another great activity. There's, you know, lots of parks that have berries and other things. And even if it's not the edible stuff, you could bring home leaves and make some art or do some other gathering of things that you find. My family also likes to find sea glass down by the water, so that can be fun. So thinking like a kid is good.
So I'm a fan of outsourcing when you can do it as well. You know, we have an only child, so sometimes he just really doesn't want to do another outdoors thing with just his parents. And so we've come up with a couple of strategies this fall. We found a local teenager to take him and a friend down to the local courts and do a very informal tennis lesson. It's pretty cheap. It gets them outside for a couple of hours and he gets a chance to socialize with a friend. You could do something similar. You could organize a park meetup where you swap with parents in terms of, you know, who supervises that. There are certainly a lot of organizations that still have some kind of outdoor activities. There are outdoor preschools and nature groups. There is outdoor parkour and there's also indoor parkour as well. So those are just some ideas for how to outsource the outdoor time and make it fun for your kids. And I think it's also good if you do have an outdoor space, just to look for simple ways to kind of make it a little more fun. We did invest in a ping pong table, which is a bigger investment this summer, and we've had a lot of fun with that. Here you can see socially distanced ping pong with my son and a friend of his. You can create a little digging space, go to the local Goodwill or do some trades to get some loose parts. Junk has always been a really preferred activity for my son. We had some tires out in the driveway for a while and he was always building forts with those. You could, look for cheap toys that you don't have already, like badminton, or just some new things that just kind of rejuvenate your outdoor space a little bit and make it fun for kids. And gear is really, really important. Here we've got, full on rain gear. We always invest in really good boots so that we can get outside in almost any kind of weather, and that's really important. And I think this fall it's especially important to look for that. There are a number of secondhand gear shops in Seattle where you can find some of those. Your local Buy Nothing group is also a really terrific resource. And technology can be really fun in the outdoors. I feel like we've just really discovered that as a family in the past 6 months. There's an app called Seek. If you look at the upper left area, that's its icon, and it's a nature ID app. You can take pictures of plants and birds and insects and identify them through citizen science. And my son keeps trying to identify me, and it keeps thinking I'm actually not a human, which he thinks is hilarious. The lower app with the birds is a wonderful bird watching app called Merlin ID, where you can also start to learn about the birds in your yard. And to the right, you can also start to learn about native lands through an app that will help identify the native history of the land that your house or neighborhood sits on. And of course, I think you're probably all familiar with Pokemon Go, which can be a great way to get kids to walk for long periods of time as they explore the neighborhood and also try to catch Pokemon. There's also stargazing apps. There's actually a Seattle Tree Walks app, and there's a lot of other different ways to explore.
I'm always amazed at how long my kids will walk with Pokemon Go, even if they say, I'm so tired, but if there's a screen involved, it can be just that much more fun. I also want to share some ideas for just ways that we can use parks to get outside. They can just be a fun little incentive to get out and try something new. And so one of the things you can do is try a new activity. We just mentioned other apps, but another activity that also does have an app associated with it is geocaching. And the cool thing about geocaching is that it is everywhere. It's literally all over the world. So anywhere you go, basically, you can almost always find geocaches, and they often tend to be in parks. Normally what you would do is find them and then swap treasure. So like leaving a little treasure in there and taking something and signing a logbook. During the pandemic, my family has been doing kind of a no-touch version of geocaching, where we're just trying to spot the geocache container rather than opening it and touching it. So, but it still really has worked well for us and gotten us outside a lot. Some other things that you can try are going to one of the parks and building a fort out of branches that you find. We've had a lot of fun doing that. You can try what our family calls tree frisbee golf. So rather than going to like a real frisbee golf course where there, a lot of times there's adults that take it very seriously. My kids like are throwing frisbees everywhere. We'll sometimes just go to a big park where there's not people around and just see how many trees we can hit with the frisbees. And that can be really fun. You can do family kickball. You can also just take like almost any lawn game, like from bocce ball to like cornhole or other tossing games, and just bring them to a park and just have a change of scenery. And that can be just a good way to get out. And kids love games, and it's a good family bonding activity. You can also just try a new park. Seattle has more than 480 parks. So if you think about outside of Seattle, like the whole Puget Sound area, we're talking about thousands of parks. And yet we all tend to just go to the same ones that are in our neighborhoods. So trying something new could be a fun way to get out. And it could be like, you know, daily little afternoon activity, or it could be a weekend thing. But that has been really fun for my family and a great way for me to get kind of out of the house and out of the neighborhood too. And I'm just going to name a few parks that I really love that I think a lot of people don't know about. One of them is Jack Block Park in West Seattle. This is a really cool park because it's got a paved path the entire way. So it's really friendly for strollers, scooters, bikes, and there's just something new to see around every corner. It's really just like picturesque and interesting. There's a lot of old port activity around it. You can often see bald eagles and sea lions. And then when you come out to the end, you get this amazing view of downtown. So adults can appreciate that, even if kids don't really care. So that can be a really fun park. And it is worth, you know, making the drive over with no West Seattle Bridge right now. As a West Seattleite, I can say that. Another park that is really cool that my family just discovered during the pandemic is Des Moines Beach Park. And what's neat about it is there's a lot to do in kind of two different sections. So there's a beautiful, huge beach where it's very easy to socially distance. Even on the weekends, there's just like so much space, really big dock that you can go out, you can watch people fish. And then it's also an end point for this fairly short bike trail that's very kid friendly. If you park at the bottom and bike up the trail, then when you turn around and come back down, it's almost like a ride where you can just coast the whole way back down the hill. And it was honestly one of the things that my kids did during the pandemic that they were like, this was so fun, Mom. So that was a win. We're definitely going to go back and do that. And it's a very good year-round park. Another great park for exploring in fall, especially with the leaves changing, is Kubota Garden down in South Seattle. It's a really perfect size park for just kid length walks and hikes. Lots to see around every corner. There's bridges, there's narrow little trails, there's interesting art, variety of trees, and as the leaves change, it's just beautiful. I find it to be a very peaceful, calming place, which is probably what we all need right now. So I definitely recommend checking that out if you have not been. And then Shoreview and Boeing Creek parks are two adjacent parks up in Shoreland that are actually really large. If you look at them on a map, you kind of think, wow, why have I not noticed this before? And so I just lump them together because the trails kind of work their way between the two parks. You can actually take some really nice walks or hikes in the fall and winter. It can get a bit muddy in some places, so it's a good one to bring some rubber boots along. And it also has a really nice off-leash area. So if you're a family with a dog and looking for something new to check out, you might want to try that park.
And I'm going to talk a little bit about some ideas for other kinds of fall family adventures outside. So first of all, I just wanted to mention that I am the editor of a book that came out just about 2 years ago. It was published by ParentMap, and it's called 52 Seattle Adventures with Kids. And this book is organized by season. Most adventures are within 2 hours of Seattle. It's really focused on cheap and low-cost adventures that are great for kids of multiple ages. And there are a lot of outdoor adventures in there. It's not exclusively about outdoor adventures, but we cover that pretty exhaustively, and also a lot of ideas for free fun. And I'm going to draw some of the ideas that I talk about from that book. And you can also find a lot about these ideas on ParentMap.com as well, which is always publishing fantastic out and about articles. So fall hiking is really terrific. You know, traditionally there are fewer crowds out on trails in the fall. I think that has changed with COVID. There are a lot more people outside, and we will talk about that a little bit later, but it's still a really nice ritual to do. You can do a lot of great hikes within the city, as Linnea was talking about. You know, Discovery Park has a wonderful 3-mile loop. Magnuson Park is another huge park that really accommodates a lot of people, and there's some nice trails there as well. We love a park in Kirkland that has just about a 1.5-mile loop trail, and it's called O.O. Denny Park, and we've gone there several times during the pandemic. And it's a great tot-sized hike, and you get the experience of elevation and really wonderful old growth trees and that feeling of being away from the city. And then of course you can get out for longer distances. The picture on the right is of a really wonderful hike for kids and families called Natchez Peak, and it's up just outside of Mount Rainier National Park. And it's a 3-mile loop. There are incredible views, and there is hardly any elevation gain. So it is crowded, so it's best to go on a weekday if you can do it, or early on a weekend. And we have more ideas in the book for these types of hikes. Biking is a really wonderful socially distanced activity that I'm sure your family is exploring. And there are a lot of great bike trails out there beyond the Burt Gilman, which we've mostly stayed away from. And we have a number of ideas about that in the book. One of my favorites is the Centennial Trail up in Snohomish, which I think you can bike up to about 50 miles, but we like to do about a 5-mile loop, park a few miles outside of Snohomish, bike to Snohomish, get a treat there, and then bike back. And it's through farmland, and it's very pretty, and you can combine it with the trip to a pumpkin farm. These pictures are of a wonderful mountain biking park called Duthie Hill out in Issaquah. And if you're adventurous tweens or older kids haven't tried mountain biking, they might want to give this a try. There are a variety of trails, and they're kind of graded by difficulty, a little bit like ski trails. And so kids can get all these kind of bumps in. You know, you don't have to do crazy stuff, but it's a really fun thing to do. And my son, who doesn't love road biking that much, really, really enjoys Duthie Hill. It's apple picking season, and I was pleased to see that farms are open. As I mentioned earlier, foraging and eating outside are one of my family's favorite things to do. And there are some wonderful farms that are not too far from Seattle. One of our favorites is the farm at Swans Trail, also in Snohomish. And they're open starting this week, they say anyway, with lots of social distance and COVID protocols that you'd want to check out. And you can pick Honeycrisp apples. And they also have a lot of pumpkin patch activities later in the fall. Skipley Farm is another great one in Snohomish. It's also worth making a trip up to Cedar Woolley area to a wonderful farm called the Jones Creek Farm that has a whole bunch of different heirloom varieties of apples and is just outside of North Cascades National Park, and is really, really pretty. And, you know, very fun for kids of multiple ages, and you can get your apple bounty. It's also salmon spotting season, of course, and you can combine that with hiking and biking or other activities. One of our favorites is Carkeek Park. That's later in October and November, and you can do some hikes on the trails and look at the salmon amazingly making their way up through Piper's Creek into Seattle, which is really incredible. We call it the Dead Fish Hike, so just, you know, fair warning. Another wonderful one is the Cedar River Trail. You can see salmon along the Cedar River and also do a bike ride down in the Renton area. And then if you want to make the trip down to Olympia, McLean Creek is a really wonderful area with an interpretive trail down there and incredible salmon spotting, which would be later in the fall. It's still summer, and getting out in the water is another terrific socially distanced activity. I feel like we just kind of started doing this later in the season, but we've had some wonderful experiences kayaking out on the lake in the evening and out on Lake Union from the Northwest Outdoor Center, and it really feels like a mini vacation. And it's fun for kids, and older kids could take their own craft out, and tweens especially love it. There's canoeing and, of course, stand-up paddleboarding and skimboarding as well that older kids would love to try. Forts and treehouses. These are staple activities for kids, and we have a whole chapter in the book about different ways to explore this theme around the Puget Sound. We love to go to some of the military forts around the Sound just for a day of exploration and looking at old gun batteries and beaches. There's a couple of pictures of Fort Casey on the top right and in the center, which is on Whidbey Island, and it just has a huge expansive space, great for social distancing, and you can explore the beach, you can look at the old military armaments and talk about the history of Puget Sound. And then down in the bottom right is a wonderful treehouse at Mercer Slough Park in Bellevue. I'm not actually sure you can go up in it right now, but you can certainly look at it. And they have wonderful wetland trails that are usually not too crowded and very flat and really great for younger kids and, fairly close to the city. Sorry. So we just wanted to go over a few things as we kind of wrapped up just our ideas for things to do outside, just some things to keep in mind and some resources to make sure that you're recreating safely and responsibly outdoors in the fall. So a few safety tips. It's always good to choose less crowded spots, of course, in this time of COVID. Bring layers and rain gear, bring food and water. Always check trail status. Certain parks and different trails have been closed from time to time. Washington Trails Association at WTA.org is a fantastic resource. We use it all the time. Bringing a first aid kit, bringing the 10 essentials, which you can find online, just some basic stuff to make sure that you're safe. And I'll just share a quick cautionary tale about a recent hiking experience I had. I have been going on some solo hikes during COVID just to get out in nature by myself. It's also really important for adults' mental health. And I tripped on a rock while hiking Mount Si and broke my wrist. You can see my little cast here. And I did not have a first aid kit. I wasn't really that prepared. Luckily, there were people fairly nearby who helped me splint my wrist and get down to the trail and call my husband and then get to the ER. But it was really a lesson to me in walking my talk. So I just wanted to share that, and it's especially important with kids. And then, as I mentioned before, there are really unprecedented numbers of people who are outdoors these days, which is terrific, of course, for all of our collective mental health. But there has been some reports coming out. There was a recent one in the Seattle Times just about people who are really not being responsible and, leaving waste outside and, requiring emergency services and doing higher risk activities. So just being really careful to be responsible, especially during this time. There's a terrific website that I believe ParentMap links to all the time. It's recreateresponsibly.org, and they share a lot of tips. Obviously you want to follow COVID protocols. You want to pack all of your waste out and stay close to home if you can, and also be inclusive to everyone that you see in the outdoors, even with a mask, which can be hard sometimes.
Yeah, and so as we're talking about being inclusive and welcoming, just want to acknowledge that, of course, there are a lot of inequities around access to the outdoors and nature, and even just where people live throughout the Puget Sound region, whether they have a park within walking distance or a park where they feel safe. So one One fact, there's some research that came out recently, about a year ago, from a report called The State of Play, Seattle King County. And it showed that girls, immigrants, kids in South King County, and youth of color get less physical activity and have fewer opportunities to play outside, according to that study. And so it's just really important to keep all of that in mind. There's some research being done to examine whether that is getting even worse right now during COVID. There's a lot of suspicion that it probably is. And it's a really real issue that we all need to address. King County Play Equity Coalition is a great new coalition that is bringing together some municipalities, some bigger organizations and parks departments, nonprofits, and then just community volunteers and community organizations to really try to, come together and address this and figure out how we can really increase access and make our outdoors more equitable for everybody. There are also a lot of great organizations. So one thing that we can all do, beyond just focusing on getting our own families outside, is just being part of this work of increasing access for everybody. Here are just a list of some of the many awesome national and local organizations that are doing great work. So you can join one of these organizations, you could financially support them, you could learn more about them and share about them. Also just being a good ally in the outdoors and just acknowledging that not everybody feels safe everywhere. And it's a problem that we need to fix. So, and one little thing that we can all do, I think it's especially important to make sure that teenagers feel welcome in parks and in the outdoors, especially teenagers of color. And so one thing that we as adults can do is when we see teenagers out in parks, we can just smile at them and say hello and just send them the signal that of course they are welcome. And that can just be one, very small thing to do. There's also this Diversify Outdoors hashtag. You can check that out and find lots of other information and resources on social media.
And we just wanted to share a few other ideas to find ideas and inspiration. Linnea and I, about, I think 2 years ago now, founded a Facebook group called Outdoor Childhood Puget Sound, and you can just search for that and find it. And we very loosely run it with the help of lots of others, and it's really turned into a great place for conversation and ideas and links around getting kids outside. So we'd love you to join and love you to share it as well. ParentMap.com, where I worked for 5 years, and I'm always astounded when I go back on there and especially look at the calendar section of how much is in there these days. It's just a terrific resource for ideas about getting outdoors and all kinds of things. And then Linnea's website is so fantastic, yearofseattleparks.com, which chronicles her adventure to visit every single park in Seattle. So I really encourage you to check that out as well. And then we also wanted to share our books that we mentioned as great resources. So 52 Seattle Adventures with Kids, published by ParentMap and edited by me, includes different chapters from 19 different writers, many of whom are experts in different aspects of getting outdoors and engaging kids in activities. And then Linnea's wonderful book published by the Mountaineers, Discovering Seattle Parks. And you can find both of those at local bookstores and online. So we encourage you to check those out as well. And thanks to ParentMap for hosting again. And we're excited to spend some time on the Q&A.
Excellent. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you for the fun inspiration and new fresh ideas. Few questions really quick. If you could just repeat what the apps were. I think there was a few people that wanted to jot that down. So the apps that you suggested in the presentation.
Sure, yes. So, and I don't know if you could go back to that slide, Linnea, that actually might be helpful. One of them was called Seek, S-E-E-K. That's a wonderful nature ID app. So you can just take a picture of like a plant. We've been identifying the plants in our yard, and then it will pull from the collective database and help you identify it. Also insects and birds. That's a terrific one. The one on the right is Native Lands. And I think it's a fairly newish app, and you can basically map a certain area and then look at the history of the tribe that where, you know, that had proprietorship of those lands in the past. So it's a terrific app for local history and Native American history. Pokemon Go is another one that I think probably most people are familiar with. That's around catching Pokemon in the outdoors in real time. And then the bottom one is Merlin ID, which is a wonderful bird watching app by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And I know, Linnea, you have a stargazing app that you've used with your family. Do you want to mention what that is?
I think it might be called Sky something.
Okay.
There are quite a few different ones. I think they're all pretty similar. And I would just also mention the geocaching app. And then
right.
along the stargazing, it's not an app, but a resource, is that NASA has a great website for tracking the International Space Station as it's going over. So you can actually just go onto NASA's website, or you can Google NASA space station, and you can actually get text message notifications when the space station's going to go overhead. And kids really love that. So that's like a thing. And now that the days are getting shorter, there's more evening to do that. So that can be a really fun one too.
Right. That's a great idea.
That's great. Thank you for more ways to interact as we're outside. There's a few questions around trying to encourage teens or tweens to get outside, off their screens, pull them away from the video games. What are your tips, tricks, suggestions on people with that challenge?
Well, I mean, we mentioned some things. I think the more adventurous that you can be, the better for that age group. So if you can try something new, or something that's a little more like adrenaline pumping, like mountain biking at one of the mountain bike places. There are also quite a few places where you can do BMX biking, which is really fun. So there's like BMX dirt courses. That is very fun and great for tweens, teens. They also love the water sports. I know a lot of friends that have teenagers, you know, go stand-up paddleboarding all the time. They always make sure they have like a life jacket on, and they stay fairly close to shore, but a lot of families are doing that, letting their kids do that independently. And then I think if you can with some friends that, you know, are where they can mask up, or they can, you know, be following the COVID protocol, and do some stuff with friends, that really helps with that age group. So bringing a friend along for a hike, letting them go on some bike rides independently if you live in a neighborhood that's safe for that, or teaming up with another family and doing a hike or a walk or an outdoor activity. Another family mentioned that her son is doing a lot of outdoor photography with friends. So just kind of trying to find something that might be a hook. And then sometimes you just have to turn off the screens and drag them outside, and they complain, and that's that's how it goes.
And I'll just add, Linnea and I were talking about this, and I don't feel like we really addressed it during the presentation, but you know, resistance is real. And I think kids can really get stuck in a groove around kind of being indoors. I know my son does. So the more that we can, make it social, because he doesn't get as much social time indoors, and then also make it just a routine or habit. It's like, well, you got to get physical activity before you have screen time. And the funnest way to do that is outdoors with friends. And then having, like, maybe it's a Friday, we're trying to establish some kind of a weekly walk or hike ritual. We do take walks every day. So the more that it's just like, this is something that we do, that doesn't work as well as kids get older and when they're teens, but that does really help with resistance. Oh, and destinations with treats. That's a big one for us. Ice cream. We use ice cream a lot.
So kind of related to your treats and bribes, which I think majority of people treats and bribes work for, but what are other ways creatively that we can inspire kids to get outside if treats aren't an option?
I think some of the stuff that Linnea talked about. So looking for, I mean, really thinking about the things that your kids like to do outside. My son he doesn't really love hiking, although I have dragged him on many hikes, but he does love berry picking and foraging. So if we can combine it with, you know, salmon berries, or now it's maybe finding a place to pick apples, that can really help, you know, along with having friends there. He doesn't like road biking, but he does like mountain biking. So I think it's being creative and then pairing. And then if, you know, if you organize with another family or friend, then there's accountability about meeting somewhere, you know, to the extent that you can make it more of an organized activity, that certainly helps us. Do you have anything to add to that, Linnea?
Yeah, I would just add that I have found through trial and error that what I call our activity really matters. So I try to not say we're going on a hike. I say we're going on some kind of an outing, and sometimes they figure it out, but it does help a little bit to just like set the tone. And also, again, like thinking like a kid, if you're like gung-ho on the destination and you think you're going to go 5 miles, you might need to just recalibrate that and think about what's fun for them. It might just be berry picking for a mile and that's all you do. We had a hike this summer that we called it an outing, and we could even tell like within the first, we made it 1/8 of a mile down the trail. I'm not even joking. My kids were just like, we are not doing this today. So luckily we had just brought a bunch of random stuff in our backpacks. And so we went down onto a beach by the river that had no trees around, and we decided to try to start a fire with like, the magnesium little chips. So we gathered like little scraps of stuff and we tried to start a fire, and like that was our activity for the day, and it ended up being pretty fun. And we did like almost no hiking. So I was like, I'm dying to go hiking, but we had to just sort of reassess what everybody was in the mood for. And we were still outside. We just didn't go a long distance at all.
Use those COVID adaptability skills, right?
Yes. And I guess I would add one more thing, that outdoor skill building is a great thing for kind of like the upper elementary school and up. So learning how to use a pocket knife safely can be very fun. You can sit outside and whittle. You can go to a park or hike and get a walking stick, and they can whittle their own walking stick. It's a really good thing for kids to learn how to do safely. We have taught our kids how to chop wood, which sounds very dangerous, but if you do it with them and you teach them how to do it safely, that can be great. You can also learn knot tying. We've been bored before and just like taken out everything from a first aid kit and looked at everything that's inside of it and talked about all the parts and sat at a picnic table and did that in a park. So it can be fun to learn like some outdoor skills too.
Those are great ideas. There's a question about suggestions for activities with youth, or for youth with disabilities. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, our parks are getting better about that. Truly accessible parks for kids in wheelchairs are hard to come by. So there's a lot of work and a lot of great organizations that are working on that. There is a new app that's being developed by University of Washington. I think it's still like in a beta testing mode, but they're actually designed it to be a place where families with kids with disabilities can get up-to-date information on activities and places to go. So keep an eye out for that. That could be a good resource. And then I think like looking for places that have paved trails or paved entry to parks can be fun, so that you can bring an activity to the park, like a tossing game, or places where you can get to and have some spaces that are wheelchair friendly, or that are good for kids that maybe have sensory issues and need some quiet spaces. So there's lots of different websites that can kind of help you find those sort of spaces, and that can help.
And I'll just mention that I know ParentMap.com does have some different articles on parks that are great for kids with special needs, and paved trails that can accommodate wheelchairs. And Outdoors for All is another wonderful resource. I'm not exactly sure what they're doing right now during COVID times.
You both have lots of activities suggestions for outdoors. There's one question from a family with a 6th grader, a 5th grader, and a 2nd grader, and wondering how to keep them all engaged with kind of different interests, ages, and levels.
That's tough. I think that is really hard. I think you have to look for activities that your family seems to be drawn to and that can work for different ages. So it might be biking, where a younger kid is maybe attached to a parent's bike. It might be some other activity like kickball that's pretty family friendly for all ages. There are some biking spots that can be great for different ages. And then you might also just like need to have kids take turns. So we do that a lot with 3 kids in our family. Like one person gets to pick where we go one day and somebody else gets to pick another day, and they kind of get their turn. And also if you can split things up and do things with different kids on different times, that can be helpful too, if that's possible. But I know that challenge, even though my kids are fairly close in age, still that can sometimes really feel like a difficult thing. You have any other ideas, Lisa?
I was just going to say that we take turns and we only have one kid, so we all can't agree on what to do. So that is really hard, and I think it can help to have rituals around that, so that you know if you don't get to do exactly what you want to do this time, that next time you do.
Yeah.
How about ways to kind of help? Well, the question is, I love hiking with my kids, but I'm afraid to do it alone. Any suggestions?
Well, I think finding other people to do it with, which is probably the obvious one. I mean, there is a wonderful group, and again, I'm not totally sure how they're operating right now, but it's Hike It Baby, and they're all about meetups for people who want to hike with young kids. I was sad that they started, after my son had aged out a little bit. When my son was 3 or 4, I just posted on a local listserv back when they had listservs, to organize like a weekly meetup. And I found 2 other families, both with twins. Again, you want really small groups, so it might work to just query people that you know. But we had a meetup group for a year on Monday afternoons, which was I think one day off work. And we would just meet at different parks all around the city. And it was so great for the parents and for the kids, because I think really doing stuff that's good for you too. We didn't touch on that as much, but these health benefits are for parents as well. Do you have ideas, Linnea?
There are a few other Facebook groups that are good also. I think it's called Pacific Northwest Hiking with Kids or something similar. There's a few oriented toward like women in hiking, which also a lot of people have kids, and those either could be good places to find other parents that live close to you, or to find ideas of places to go. So I think as kids get into like elementary school, it can be really helpful to just find families that you click with, and try to, again, as we already said, like, have some sort of regular meetups with other families, or regular hikes. And one other thing is, if you're nervous about hiking with kids, starting in urban areas is much easier, because you're not far from other people, you're not far from your car. So, the big parks in Seattle are getting a lot of traffic right now, but during the week, it can be a little bit better. So like Seward Park, Discovery Park, Lincoln, Carkeek, those could be doable during the week, especially now that most kids are back in school. So if you've got younger preschool age kids, you'll almost always see other people. So it's a good way to kind of get started with that sort of activity. And you're close to home if you just need to bail and go home.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And there are so many kid-size hikes in parks all around Seattle, and Tacoma as well, and Bellevue, and all around the Puget Sound.
Excellent. Well, this makes me even more excited, as if I wasn't already excited to get out once the smoke clears, to try some of these new adventures. Any other tips or suggestions you'd like to share before we close out, Elisa or Linnea?
I would just add that, it's so hard right now with remote learning, and with parents that are working like full-time, or maybe having to leave the house and leave kids with older siblings or with grandparents, and like the stress is real. And so I think all of us, just going really gentle on ourselves, and recognizing that like we're not going to get outside every day successfully, and sometimes everybody's in tears when you try to get out the door. And so it is just a hard time, and nobody's alone in this. We are all struggling. Nobody is doing it perfectly. But hopefully these are some helpful ideas that can just kind of urge things along in the right direction. But it's going to continue to be tough for a long time, until both the smoke clears and COVID clears and life returns to a little bit more of normal. But we're kind of all in it together as parents, and we can just sort of support each other in all our imperfections.
Yeah, I would just echo Linnea. That was really well stated. And I think looking for stuff that fills your cup. So I like to get outdoors, even if it's just down to look at the creek near our house for 5 minutes. And if I can get my son there, that's great. And if I can't, that's okay too. And yeah, I think just, looking for those small victories. But it's really been fun to dig into this subject for this presentation. And thanks again to ParentMap for hosting it. These virtual events are super helpful for connecting people.
Well, thank you both for taking time to join us, and thank you to everyone who's joined at home to listen in to our event today. We have another one tomorrow. Tomorrow is also at 2 p.m. and it's virtual learning, so making the most of online learning webinar featuring a virtual school expert, Jen Francis from the Washington Connections Academy. So you can visit parentmap.com/live to register for that event or to learn about other upcoming ParentMap Live events. So thank you again to everyone for joining us. Thank you, Elisa and Linnea. Truly appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good evening, everyone.